Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special BANLIST episode of the Expend to Draw podcast. I am, of course, your host, Sunny, and I am here with my co-hosts, magnificent MBT Yu-Gi-Oh!, the terrific Trishula TTV, and the illustrious Law YGO. How are we doing, everybody, boys?
Love that you introduced Joseph as MBT Yu-Gi-Oh! And not MBT Illustrals.
It doesn't matter. None of this shit matters.
Habit.
No, I'm doing good. Personally, I'm super excited to talk about the fallout of this ban list. But first and foremost, I think we have to deal with the elephant in the room. Did they do this ban list because 3 of the 4 Casters Corner hosts were in the top 16? Vote on your phones now. I think it's a yes. I think they are trying to keep us down.
2-4 in top 4.
Yeah, 2
More
in top
than the Illustronauts. Let's go, baby.
I was about to say,
literally
boat
true.
race the
All up
Illustronauts this
top.
weekend.
2 in the top
Only 2
4,
of them
3 in the top 16, and 1 who played strained flat out didn't play because he was driving back from Ohio. Sorry.
Yeah,
Listen,
to be fair, 2 of them were casting. So
Yeah.
I will say, driving through Ohio and failing to show up to your matches is only marginally worse than what Kevin did.
So we do need to talk about the ban list on this episode, but before we do, I do want to at least mention the results of this weekend. This is me successfully burying the lead. So this weekend there were 2 major tournaments. We of course had the Illustrals official webcam tournament. This was held on this Sunday, December 1st. The notable things here are, of course, MBT getting first after Swiss and ending up in the top 4. Only 2 losses on the day, both to Jess. And
To the same asshole.
And of course, Trish finishing second in this particular tournament. Is that right? Did I get that right?
yeah. And then we'll throw him a bone. Me and Josh played the same deck, like both tournaments. So Josh won on Saturday, the same deck, and then the next day I got second with the same deck, and then he got 4th because we friendly fired in top 4. We friendly fired in top 4, and I won. And we just sat down. And it's like, well, the deck made finals again. We don't know which one of us made it, but it made finals again.
4 out of 4 Nimbug people in the top 4, by the way.
I will say, with Jess eliminating both Joseph and Mike, I think Jess is officially our rival here, right?
Don't
Can
start
we
with
pick
this
an
rival
easier
shit on
rival?
Illustrals again.
Yeah, no, legit. Jess is the GOAT, quite frankly. Sad she didn't win the Illustriad, but God, Jess is the GOAT.
And not only that,
Wait, can we even say that? Have they finished posting?
Yes, they have
Yes.
posted
They have,
all of the
yeah.
Illustriad matches.
okay. And not only did Jess outright kick both of you out of the tournament, Jess's partner, who played the same list, was one of my only losses in Swiss, and they ended up topping as well. And then Jess eliminated them in top 8. Amazing stuff, really. The most impressive outing of the weekend, of course, was me getting 13th, main decking Bloom. So,
Congrats on getting your invite.
thank you.
Congrats on
You know?
giving Trish a near aneurysm.
Yeah. I always say the first time that you top, you can say without getting you don't need to go to top cut to say you topped the first time. After this, though, top 16 doesn't count as a top anymore. After that, you have to actually get top 8. So
Top 16 counts if we have over 128 players.
Which we didn't.
We did not.
Which we did not.
yeah. I got additional prizing, though, so I'm calling it a top. I'm officially one of those guys.
You heard it here first, Sunny top.
Don't worry. I've spent a lot of time hearing from guys who say they can top and don't.
All right, well, let's lead in with the first limits. Of course, I think the big ones here are Equilinks, of course. This is the biggest hit on the list, in my opinion. Obviously, yes, there are other things that are maybe more impactful in different ways, but I think Equilinks is a pretty direct hit to Earth in a way that, like Elichic's not that big of a hit to Thunder in the same way that Equilinks is to Earth, right?
So Equilinks is a big hit to Earth. I do not think that kills Earth by any means. Yes, it really does hurt them, but it just means that they'll splash in other packages more. Arcolith is a decent hit to Thunder, but quite frankly, if you're losing to Arcolith, it means you're playing into it, and it's good players do not play into Arcolith. Elichic is probably the biggest hit of the ones that they put in here, because it's not just a hit to Thunder, that's a hit to every deck that wants to search Divines, which basically does hamper a lot of utility in the format. Therogeist I think is hilarious, but I have a completely separate tangent on that. And Race to the Top I think is very much misguided, because Trish and MBT just kind of proved a theory this
Why'd
past
they ban a
tournament.
bad card? Why did they do that?
Whoa! They didn't ban it. Hey! They put it to 1.
Vista 2 is an incredible hit,
told me to.
honestly. It's always the third Visk that gets you. Demeter and Zeus going to 1 each is awesome. I hate that it is temporary, but I get it. I think that's it.
Go for
This
it whenever
list
you're ready.
I'm still
spits
thinking,
in
by
the
the way.
face of everything that every Elestrals player has fought for. They've banned all the good cards. I don't know. I think all these are pretty understandable. I expected Equilinks to go to 1. That card's really annoying. I don't know why they didn't ban Elichik. It really sucks that now we're gonna play Plucky and then a Plucky that's good and trades for everything. Pharaohgeist is hilarious. I can't believe they're doing that. It's the funniest thing in the universe. It actually is the third Viserys that gets you, because after you resolve Viserys once, then you can advance your board state without having to commit to your normal cast the next turn, provided you have a third in deck. I do appreciate that they got rid of one of those, and I think it'll live on there forever, like Malicious. What else? Zeus and Demeter to 1, I don't think really matters. It kind of sucks you can't hard draw Zeus or Demeter and still pop off, but it is what it is. Argalith is so fucking funny. I boarded out of 1 Argalith every single game I played with 2. Race to the Top is a removal spell in a game that has 19 removal spells.
Yeah, I mean, the ban list is pretty straightforward. Chick to 1 would have been a silly hit if they hadn't put the 2 Divines to 1. So I think the 2 Divines to 1 are a good hit. I think they will become a bad hit when they unhit them, so I think they should stay hit. Pharaohgeist should have gotten banned. That thing going to 1 was a mistake. It should have been banned.
It really is a problem, but it's hard to explain why.
No, it's not. Activate Lunar Phase Full Moon. Turn 1, play the dude that searches Full Moon, set Full Moon. Okay, I will ascend with Full Moon into Pharaohgeist. Easy peasy, game over. Attack.
Okay,
with
you
Pharaohgeist.
explained it pretty well, I'll be honest.
Yeah, okay, they printed a searchable summon Pharaohgeist card. Echolinks, that's fine. Probably should have been banned, but to 1 is fine. Arcalith to 1 was really funny. Race to the Top was the only weird hit, I think. I don't think that needed to get hit, but removal is good, so sure, whatever.
I would like to say kind of as a capstone that while so many of these hits are here's all the cards that Jess was playing and Josh was playing and Trish was playing, the deck that Trish threw together for me is largely untouched. I feel like you lose, obviously, the Elichik. You get to play Plucky in that slot, which sucks ass. But everything else is completely fine. It's the deck that accounts for the race limit. I'm a little dumbfounded in that it seems like there's a deck that's similarly good.
Because you lost 2 Elichik, and the Elichik was a good card in that deck.
You also lost.
Yeah, there are very few
And
good cards
1
in that
Zeus.
deck is the problem.
You also lost to Zeus, which is not that big of a deal.
It's not
but
nothing.
The thing with the limits is that it makes Thunderstorm really good.
Yeah.
Because if you Thunderstorm hit the Divine now, they just don't have the Divine for the rest of the game, which is impactful.
Do you think it opens up space for cards like P-Gust and shit that can maybe alter at quick speed and just deny it forever?
Potentially. What I think it opens up really space for is Divine Blessing, baby. Divine Blessing up top. Let's go. Best card ever.
Where's all my
Magic
divine
Jammer,
blessing
too strong.
enjoyers? There's a couple of things that I really want to highlight here. Something that's really kind of odd to me is that in the video, they said that Demeter and Zeus are going to be coming back February 1st. Trish, you had mentioned earlier, not in the podcast episode, but earlier today when we first discussed this, that they didn't put a hard claim on it. But I went and rewatched the video, and no, they were pretty clear cut. There was no I feel like the team kind of painted themselves into a corner here where if Earth and Thunder are still very good, they've already completely committed to bringing those back 2-3 on February 1st. How do we feel about this?
Didn't they say in the video that they think that Earth is still going to be the best deck after this ban list?
He did say
Like,
that.
didn't they
He
say that
said
in the video?
testing, Earth and Thunder are still powerhouses, I think were the exact words.
Yeah, so from my testing of Moonrise before the ban list, Earth was by far the best deck, even by a wider margin than it was right now, because it was the only deck that had space to play Hurricane where nothing else could fit it. So that just made it crazy. And then that was even accommodating for potential hits. I was already testing with stuff like Elichik to 1, Elichik to 0. I was testing with all the counter runes to 2. I was testing a bunch of stuff of potential hits, and Earth is still just crazy good. I don't know. In my head, I feel like they needed to go way harder with the hits, because if you just simply do the litmus test of take the deck lists that are already performing well, take my list or Jess's list, and just cut the cards, or even Joseph's list, cut the cards that were affected by the ban list. It's like what Joseph was alluding to. You lose 4 cards from the deck. You just put in 4 of the other good cards. Oh, cool, I have space to play main deck 3 Galaxy now. Cool.
So that actually does lead me very well into my next question, which is, do any of you think that there's a spot on this list where maybe they didn't quite hit the mark? Maybe it's not enough of a hit? Because I can't speak for the entire community as a whole, but I know that within our circles, the consensus was that just an Earth Thunder deck that is just a hodgepodge of Earth and Thunder good cards is potentially still just the best deck out there.
It absolutely is. Unfortunately, like the Earth Thunder hodgepodge list even did do really well at last weekend's tournament, and quite frankly, yes, you lose a couple Echolinks, but for the most part, they were already only playing one Demeter and one Zeus because you could use Elichick to bounce between them. Granted, now you've lost 2 Elichick, but that just kind of opens up more space for, as Drish says, the water package stuff. Galaxy Foamy has really been kind of coming back
Foamy's
into play.
crazy.
Yeah, now that the lunar stuff that it suppresses is really kind of fallen flat, Foamy is like really taken off. So yeah, absolutely, that deck is still going to be insanely powerful here. I do think that the deck that probably needs to adjust the most off of this is probably Thunder, just because Elichick and Zeus going down does mean that you have to adjust some ratios pretty heavily. But at the same time, the race to the top limit doesn't really change much because the pivot was already going in the favor of Cryoblast anyways, and Earth really only lost Echolinks and Elichick as far as their Celestial line goes, and yes, they did lose Demeter, but really, can't they just play Feloy Forest and they still have a Nexus bank available?
I think people over-focus on the idea of like Nexusing. The Nexus isn't that important. It's just you're playing good cards. Earth is just the deck that plays all the good cards.
I do kind of want to talk about, I guess I would say, the theory of the ban list, in that, like, I know we're talking about it, like, what decks live and what decks die, but the way that Elestrals works, at least at present, there is such a low amount of opportunity cost for putting different spirits in your spirit deck. You basically just play the best cards in your deck. You just look at what the best cards are and you put them in your deck and then you play that. Like, there aren't very many, I guess I would call them game plan decks. And I think the hope for the ban list is it would challenge people to play decks with a more streamlined game plan that resembles kind of, I guess, what Yu-Gi-Oh! Does now, or like Magic the Gathering's non-rotating formats. And if that was the goal with the ban list, it didn't accomplish that at all. Like, I can't imagine looking at this ban list and being like, oh boy, time for scrap, or like, it's Fire Nexuses, time to shine. Like, it feels legitimately like, okay, we lost some good stuff, we'll put in some different good stuff. And even the good stuff they hit, I think they didn't go far enough. Like, I found it so weird in that video for him to be like, Elichick is such a frustrating card. It comes down and it's immediately a 7-attack body that can get over even 2-drop Elestrals. Anyway, you can still play it.
It's very clear that they were making targets at good stuff. The only card that they did hit that was kind of towards a game plan is Pharaohgeist, and that entirely is a preemptive hit. I kind of don't think that it did enough for Pharaohgeist, because I'm going to be completely fair. As long as Pharaohgeist is even at 1, I don't think that any of the 3-drop Lunar Elestrals from Moonrise are even worth considering, just because Pharaohgeist is that good. But now you also have cards like Comalis that can just Nexus Lunar Spirits and search Pharaohgeist, so a limit, honestly, I don't even think does enough on that. I really do think that Pharaohgeist, if they were going to do a preemptive hit here, needed to realistically be banned, but I do see where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think the Pharaohgeist limit makes sense in the sense that you can't just run 3 Pharaohgeist in anything along with Lunar Phase Full Moon and just like vomit out a Pharaohgeist now. You kind of have to be on like Comalis though to like search for the Pharaohgeist and set it up, kind of in the same way that we were doing with like Celestlio Exaltus.
I want to throw it back to Joseph because I have like 2 questions in particular that I want to pick at you with. I know your thoughts on these things, and I would like to hear you expound upon them a bit more. Do you feel like we needed a ban list at this time? Because personally, I don't. I understand the frustration with the format, but for me personally, I would have been fine with just letting the format continue to play out.
I will be honest. I don't think that my opinion on this carries much weight. You know, I am willing to sit through a format that is clearly not particularly balanced because I think there's still like a lot of fun you can have in it. I'm not going to pretend like this format wasn't like solved to a certain degree. I was not yet tired of it, but I will defer to other people who have played more that are like, yep, nope, it sucked.
I'd like to hear your opinions on the concept of a preemptive hit in Pharaohgeist. Not just like whether or not it is effective, but more like the philosophy behind it.
No problem with it. I don't think we need to sit through 2 months of Pharaohgeist format.
For me personally, I don't love the idea of preemptive hitting things for the most part. You know, if something is just going to be the best deck, let it be the best deck. But I think Pharaohgeist specifically, this is something
so
that
annoying.
If people were to go and pre-play Moonrise format with multiple Pharaohgeist, they would see this. Pharaohgeist is not a fun card in the game. Like, when it hits the board, it's not a fun game state to play into. I'm fine with a high power ceiling deck, but I'm not fine with something that's unfun to play against, because even if you're playing the deck, winning is great, but sitting across from opponents who are the whole time just going, oh, not another asshole dropping a Pharaohgeist so that I can't play the game, right? Like, and I think at one, it's not enough of a problem to make it be like that every time it plays, because it's at one, it's very hard to build a dedicated strategy around specifically Pharaohgeist, so much as you're building a lunar deck that has the ability to easily get to Pharaohgeist.
I actually would disagree with that statement. I don't think that it is particularly difficult to build a deck around Pharaohgeist in Moonrise format, even with it being at 1. Once again, because Comalis exists. But I do think that by hitting it to 1, it locks Pharaohgeist to being in only decks that are dedicated to it, rather than being a generic threat that literally every deck can play, because Full Moon just turns any Celestial on your board into Pharaohgeist.
I guess
It'll be like a Garnet, right?
Yeah, I guess my pushback on that would be that I think that if you build your entire deck around Pharaohgeist, with it being limited, if you find yourself in a situation where you lose that Pharaohgeist, you lose your entire game plan. Whereas if you build a deck around other good lunar cards and include Pharaohgeist in it and have the ability to play Comalis and get 2 Pharaohgeist, then I think at that point, you know, rather than it being the build around that your entire deck revolves around, now it is a thing your deck can also do, which I think is a very different.
Yeah, but
axis to play
Pharaohgeist in and of itself will always eat a massive number of spirits out of your opponent. If it gets outed by your opponent, it's done its job. And that's kind of where I'm getting at for that, is that one Pharaohgeist is enough to get that across, because Lunar as a deck right now does have a lot of really good, powerful, aggressive options, to where if your opponent has to burn 6 to 8 spirits to out your Pharaohgeist, that is worth it.
And I guess the last thing that I want to touch on is, Trish, I want to throw it back to you because I want to hear you explain something that was mentioned earlier, which is the growing utility of foamy within the format. I know that it was mentioned on stream earlier, and I think that it is just generally good information to have. So I would love to hear you expand a bit on the utility of foamy.
So the thing with foamy is that it's a water celestial, right? And it summons water celestials, but it doesn't have to properly enchant them, right? So something that you can do is you can just run a package of like foamy plus Galaxy, because Galaxy good card, or even you can run Must Station if you really want to, and you just misenchant them because they have big defenses. And it's very hard for most Celestials decks to beat over that after they've killed the foamy. And what you do is you just ascend into your 2-drop over whatever you summon off the foamy. And this was a concept that we saw kind of come from Vault Tempest. Vault Tempest was doing this, and I really liked it, where you were just using that to make sure that you could get the Griffuse on board into the Vault Tempest, and then you win the game. But I don't think that that's necessarily how the Vault Tempest were winning most frequently. I think they were actually winning, and like in my experience playing against it, was they would just summon Arcolith. Like they'd ascend Arcolith over the Galaxy, and they'd like put like 5 spirits under it, and they just swing at you in the late game, and you're just dead, and you just can't do anything.
This is a situation where like actually the Arcolith limit almost makes sense. It's like, oh well, you know, that happens less.
Exactly. So Arcolith was on my wish list of cards to get hit, and it did.
Really?
So.
I will say the Arcolith limit, it's a great hit, but I do not think we're going to see Arcolith just drop out of decks like we saw Lavalith
No, I'm
drop.
playing that shit.
Arcolith is going to stick around because Astrabbit is still so omnipresent. Thunder is going to be an element that people are still playing, and running a package of 5 Thunder Spirits so that you have your Astrabbits online, you're probably your 1 Elichick, and your Arcolith seems pretty good to me.
Is Volt Tempest accidentally like the hardest hit deck of this ban list?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
1 Zeus, 1 Arcolith.
I mean, get
Elichick.
owned, you know.
It's just the Zeus. They have to have Zeus on the board to win.
Let's say we're living in a different timeline in which Mr. Dan A Drive says, my goal for this ban list is I want people to be playing like a game plan.
Yeah.
What has to happen, and what do you want to happen, Trish, like to make that occur?
Well, I don't know if it would cause a game plan, but it would definitely cause like a shakeup in like what we've seen over the past like 2 years worth of Alestral's gameplay. You could either ban or limit Elichick, so either way is fine. It really doesn't matter. The big one was hitting Zeus and Demeter to 1, which, yeah, I mean, all 3 of those kind of happened. I had Rabbit to 1. I think you could keep Rabbit at 3 as a load bearer, just as like a consistency tool for every deck. Because I don't think Rabbit's kind of harmless. It's just a good consistency tool. I had it on the list. Echo Links to 1, Arcolith to 1, Galaxy to 1, Eddie to 1. Race is like weird, but like you could also put it to 1. It was like on the short list of stuff. All the heavy hitters were like on the wish list. But then also on the semi-limit list was Viserys, but also Gaze, Tsunami, Shield, and PTA. All 4 of them. Put all of them to 2.
It is kind of irritating that it's like, yeah, we are shaking up the good stuff Alestrals. We are leaving all of the back row untouched.
So the reason for this isn't even like the overpoweredness of the cards or like anything like that. It's literally just to afford deck space to play other cards, because all of the counter runes in the game, you know, like you can still under this ban list still play 13, 14 counter runes. You just have to play Argo and Altar in all of your decks. But even that is, you know, like you're still having to make concessions. You still have to then like play Argo. You have to play Necklace. You have to play like a Scythe or a Thunderbolt of Zeus or whatever it is. The difference is when I just did the numbers, the litmus test I was using was just take the current best deck, take a sample deck list, and apply a ban list, and apply like limits or bans to all these cards. Under the current ban list, the Earth deck lost maybe 6 cards. Under the ban list I was proposing, they lose like 13 to 15, which means that like even if I still wanted to play all of those cards that I was already playing in whatever deck I play next, I still have to find 13 or 15 cards to put in my deck as opposed to 6. And that leaves a lot more room for people to like create a new identity for what a deck is or can be, even if you're trying to keep the deck the same deck you were already playing. I don't think you can promote game plan decks with a ban list. I don't think that's possible. Like that is just an unreasonable concept. The only way to promote the game plan decks is to print cards that promote game plan decks, and unfortunately, that just hasn't happened. Yeah, that just hasn't happened. We just didn't get that. The solution is go back in time and redesign all the sets.
I do agree with you. I think the 13 cards thing is a big deal, especially when like it was so weird listening to the ban list discussion and hearing Dan kind of address what he knew people were going to say as a result of the ban list, but not really refute it. By hitting so few cards in Earth, he was like, and I know the first thing you all are thinking is, well, we can just play Rummagem and search the good card. It's like, well, yes, if you are only replacing 3 or 4 cards in your deck, it wouldn't be too hard to just like play Rummagem or like a bad card that searches, and then proceeded to enable that as like a strategy. Why identify that that's what's going to happen unless a lot of cards are removed from the deck, and then just not remove a lot of cards from the deck?
Also in the video he mentioned, and there's something to be said for it, that he wanted to specifically make sure that these decks are still functional and playable in some capacity. Even if they're still strong, he still wants them to be functional. And I think that part of that might be a byproduct of him wanting to make sure that people don't feel like, okay, well, I've just spent this money to get into this game and I've just purchased the best deck. I want to play this deck, and oh, there's a ban list all of a sudden, and now this deck that I just bought for this game that I'm just now getting into is now invalidated. I don't know. Maybe that's the logic and that's the reasoning behind it. A certain amount of trepidation towards getting new players off put at the prospect of the deck that they just got being hit in such a young game. But at the same time, I think that that's just kind of the risk that you run with having a card game with a ban list, is that sometimes there will be newer players and sometimes those players will have a deck get hit. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think that honestly what you said, Trish, is probably the biggest thing, is that if you really want to shake things up and see considerable amounts of deck list changes, it has to come not only from engine, but from the non-engine getting hit too. I mean, do y'all remember the 2013 Yu-Gi-Oh ban list where they like semied or limited every good back row card? Like, that had a real impact. We went from Dragon Ruler to Set Pass Geargia. Like,
I remember something
lot more to
similar
it
happening
than
in
that,
Duel Links where they put every single good back row to limit 3. But yeah, we'll say byproduct of all of these hits towards Thunder that have been coming down, man, playing an unaltered Imperial starter deck is kind of sounding better and better.
Spark it, my goat. I think that is another thing that's also interesting, since you're bringing it up, is the starter deck clause, where you can like just rock up with a starter deck and play with banned cards. That's like a weird rule, because if somebody plays a Spark It against me, I'm calling judge on you. Like, I didn't even know that that was a rule until like midway through the tournament when somebody told me that that was a rule because somebody was playing that deck. If I'm a new player and I don't know about that rule, you're going to call a judge too. You're going to like accuse your opponent of cheating.
I will say this is a little bit of Yugi player bias. Magic the Gathering does this, and it's happened a number of times that a card in the starter has been banned, and they do let you play card for card. It's like,
Really?
were we coming from a Magic background, this would be like a well-known thing that occurs.
I assume
potentially
that
get
the
rotated,
issue is
though.
the same in the Magic community, and they probably have raised the same concern. It's like, if my opponent plays banned card, I call judge on them and like get deck check, and it's just like a headache, right?
It's kind of a headache. It is a little self-regulating in that, like, the starters are so fucking bad.
I will say, though, the Imperial starter deck, if you're playing it unaltered, you have 2 Spark It, who is banned, you have 2 Zeus, which is limited, and you have 2 Earthquake, which is limited. So it feels like it just keeps getting better and better just as an actual meta pick. It's still trash, but it's funny.
At the end of the day, do we all believe that this ban list does a sufficient enough job at shaking up the format to keep things fresh until Moonrise gets here on January 17th, I believe it is?
I think it keeps it at least fresh enough for 1 to 2 months worth of play. Because we're looking at 1.5 months until Moonrise is out.
Any list is going to sufficiently change things that people they'll metagame. That's fun.
Yeah, there's
But,
a psychological element to this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one
like
wants to accept that the format, like that nothing changes.
I mean, look
And
at
so
what people were playing
people
when
will change
Daybreak
stuff.
came out. You know, there was 9 months of Solar.
I love Solar.
There's always going to be something that the community is doom crying, but I will say I'm very glad to see that the Illustrals team sees that once a meta centralizes to an extent that a hit is necessary, they are very quick to act on it. Because this is the second time we have gotten a ban list 2 days after a major event that has shown very severe results in favor of 1 or 2 decks. I continue to say that the communication that they are showing us as a community is incredible, and the response time is very much appreciated. But I will say I do think that maybe cool the response time a little bit and allow your testing team more time to actually see, are these the correct hits?
Like, I genuinely think that that's actually a really bad thing. Whenever I see like the ban list drop like 2 days after a tournament, it feels like they are just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what works. Because when I look at this ban list, I'm like, okay, you guys did not test this like at all. Like, you didn't even like open up a deck builder and like just see how many cards you guys were taking away from decks. Like, because that's all you have to do to see that this ban list is not going to have a significant impact. It'll have a slight impact, but like not a significant one. And that is very concerning to me as someone who plays a lot of TCGs, because, you know, you expand this to the player base like by a lot, and eventually when the player base gets large enough, if this is the trend that happens, people will get upset. And it's a very hasty precedent to set. I think that, like, you know, I can't know because I don't, like, I'm not on the design team. I'm not like a tester or anything like that. But like, I would have wanted them to have had this ban list prepped for like a month. Like, they had this ban list like locked and loaded, like in the wings when they released Daybreak, and they modified maybe one or two things based on like, you know, tournament results, but like they knew what they were going to do in the first place because they had already tested it well enough to know what the problems would be. And I don't get that impression when we see multiple times a ban list come out very quickly when the community starts, like, you know, the rabble starts. You know, that to me is very concerning. I actually think that's a very bad thing, and I think it's communication, but it's communicating a bad message to me.
I'd like to push back on it just a little. And I'm not saying that I necessarily disagree with what you're saying here. This is me going off of something that the CEO of a company says. He did say in the video that they tested this for several weeks prior to this ban list's implementation. We don't know for a fact that that's the case. I would personally say is what this really feels like to me is that this is probably a pretty small testing team. And what they really need to do is make sure that they get a lot more games in with these decks at the nerf power levels to see kind of what these impacts are going to be on each individual deck, not just these individual decks matchups. Because like you said, I think this is like, these are decks that are missing 3 cards and 4 cards. And it might impact the consistency, but not enough to make a huge impact on the meta as a whole. It does feel definitely like these are coming in half-baked, but I would like to think that there is some amount of prep that we're not seeing and that they just timed the release of the list towards when this tournament happened.
Yeah, I think that's ideal, but you know, even what you were saying is like a few weeks to me doesn't feel like significant time. I feel like it should be a few months worth of testing, even just for a ban list. And on top of that too, it's like the communication being so quick, it regardless of what the scenario is, it comes off half-baked. So like it's undermining their own efforts if they are putting in all that time. I think that's, you know, my read on it. I would have rathered it come out like right before the tournament, for example, to be like, oh, surprise, gotcha, figure it out. You know, and that's what I would have preferred, because that at least creates a shakeup for the player rather than for the team.
And being clear here, we're not talking about like, oh my god, we didn't see an interaction in Daybreak, and as a result, like, this is something we just weren't prepared for, right? It's literally them being like, base set cards are good. Like,
yeah.
We've known this for over a year at this point.
Yeah, and this has been the deck that's been the best deck since base set and like since prototype. So like this has been 2 years of this same deck like performing over and over. We've been testing it for a few weeks. It's like we haven't tested this ban list for like 6 months at this point. Like, you know, that to me is the concern.
And then when the hits do get here on those decks, they feel underwhelming.
Right, exactly. And it's like, okay, we're going to need another ban list before, you know, like before Moonrise meta. Otherwise, Moonrise is going to flop in the same way the last 2 sets have flopped, in that, like, not that they're bad sets, but it's like they're just not releasing cards that like compete with what's already out. And that, like, that's the main issue, is that just like these feel like extensions of base set rather than like, or like expansions to it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There are 13 cards currently on the ban list. The 2 bans are both from base set. The semi-limit is from base set. And of the 10 limits, 6 of them are from base set. 2 are Frostfall, Lavalith, and Race to the Top. Race to the Top is very arguably, it's probably the weakest card on this ban list by a wide margin. And then from Daybreak, you have Arcolith and Ferrogeist. Ferrogeist hasn't had time to prove that it's a threat. When you look at the 13 cards on this list, the 9 that really deserve to be here the most are all base set. These are things that we've known are issues for 2 years. Feels like we've known these are issues for a long time, right? I think in the finals, we only saw base set cards played the whole finals.
The base set cards are vastly superior to a lot of what has been coming out. I can pretty much list on one hand the number of cards from both Frostfall and Daybreak that I would argue are actually like staple cards on the same level as many of the base set cards. But the problem I think that we're facing is, I've heard multiple times over and over again that members of the testing circle are calling for Astrabbit's head. And I think Dan actually put it very eloquently, because he did actually respond on this. And the problem is that Astrabbit at its current state is kind of a load-bearing Elestral. If you take Astrabbit out, almost all slower decks in the format cease to be able to compete because you are not able to see enough of your deck to keep up with the faster paced decks. That is apparently going to be addressed in upcoming sets to where Astrabbit will no longer be an auto include 3 of and everything. His words, not mine. But as of right now, Astrabbit is too critical to the game's base infrastructure for them to hit.
I think that's like apt.
I
don't really want to see Rabbit hit. I just think that it's like you could hit it.
I'm going to bring us to a close here. I have 3 things that I want to hit. I'm going to throw 1 to each of you. Joseph, you haven't said anything in a while. Let's start with you. I want to hear your biggest winner and biggest loser from this ban list.
Biggest winner has got to be the deck I played. I can't talk it up enough. It seems like they came to the wrong consensus about Race to the Top. There's certainly 1 fewer Zeus means that it's much less likely you'll open it, but you can still find Zeus with pretty relative consistency just by playing a couple of pluckies in the spot that you had Elichik. Throw in some Galaxies, buddy, you've got a stew going. The crux of that deck is it's all the good Alestrals, and it gets to play 1 of the good Alestrals, enabling an Earthquake that costs 1 mana. That's great. Biggest loser of this this ban list is all of the nerds online who want Astrabbit dead. All of those assholes are going to have to eat their own words because he lives again, another 100 years of Astrabbit. I will say I agree with all of you. I think Astrabbit is a necessity at this point, and I would do anything to see my king survive until Moonrise 2 in 2029.
Also,
All
Bull
right.
Tempest on Suicide Watch.
True. Law, let's throw it to you. I want you to give me the hit that is not here that you would have liked to have seen.
Cryoblast. 1,000% Cryoblast. If you are going to hit every other removal spell in the game, you need to hit Cryoblast too. Because quite frankly, Race to the Top is a complete nothing hit while Cryoblast is still at 3.
What do you think is the best deck post-ban list, realistically?
Fire Nexus, baby, let's go! It's either fire or solar.
It's always solar in your
It's
mind.
all. I mean, the answer's always solar for me. But like,
What about
it's either fire or still Earth or Thunder. Like Earth and Thunder haven't really lost much of anything. But I'm gonna try fire again. I like fire.
Thank you all so much for watching this episode of the Expend to Draw podcast. And of course, if you do like this and other Alestrals content that we provide here on the channel, be sure to leave a like, leave a comment giving your thoughts on the ban list, and of course, go ahead and subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future. Of course, you can also, if you are shopping for Alestrals merchandise through the Alestral store, you can follow the link to that down below. There's an affiliate link that helps us provide you with this content by paying us, give us money, which you can also do by following the TCG Player affiliate link in the description down below before purchasing all of your Alestrals cards there. Of course, be sure to individually support the Law over on the Law YGO. Be sure to support Trishula at TrishulaTTV over on his Twitch channel, and of course, MBT, Yu-Gi-Oh, and MBT Alestrals on his Twitch and YouTube channels accordingly. And of course, if you want to go that extra mile to support the channel, you can go ahead and get yourself a channel membership. These do awesome things like giving us money directly, but also you get some cool emotes and things of that sort that are exclusive to the channel. You'll get access to members-only streams when we start doing those, probably when Alestrals Clash goes live. And of course, when you're in these streams where Trish reviews all the deck lists, you can mock him with Barabong. So, of course, Barabong supremacy. Thank you all so much, and happy casting.